The weight of a crown. It's a phrase we've all heard, a metaphor for the burdens of leadership. But what happens when the weight of that crown is nothing compared to the weight of the person wearing it? Today I want to share with you the fascinating tale of King Alexander of Viridian, a ruler whose physical transformation became a powerful lesson about personal change and the illusion of shortcuts. In the prosperous kingdom of Viridian, King Alexander once ruled with a heavy hand, not because he was tyrannical, but because his hand, like the rest of him, had grown increasingly heavy over the years. At 43 years old, Alexander had transformed from the strapping young prince who had ascended the throne to a man whose physical presence had expanded in direct proportion to his shrinking ambition. The royal portrait painters had a particularly difficult job. Each year they would delicately adjust their renderings, subtly widening the king's silhouette, softening his jawline, and adding an extra chin or two. The royal tailors worked overtime, constantly letting out seams and adding fabric to the king's elaborate robes. His golden crown, once a perfect fit, now sat awkwardly atop his head, often tilting to one side, as if it too was exhausted by the effort of adorning such a listless ruler. Alexander's daily routine had devolved into a predictable cycle, waking late to a breakfast that could feed a family of 4, followed by a brief and unenthusiastic audience with his ministers, where he would wave away concerns about border disputes or economic policies. Tomorrow, he would mumble, reaching for another sweetmeat. We'll address it tomorrow. But tomorrow never seemed to come. By midday, he would retire to his private gardens, where servants would fan him as he dozed under the shade of ancient oak trees. Evenings brought elaborate feasts where Alexander would eat and drink until he could barely keep his eyes open, before being helped to his chambers by increasingly concerned attendants. The people of Viridian, once proud of their nation's strength and prosperity, began to whisper. Markets buzzed not with trade but with gossip. "Have you seen the king lately?" merchants would ask one another. They say he can barely climb the steps to his own throne. In the council chambers, ministers exchanged worried glances. Lord Pharaoh, the Minister of Defense, spoke in hushed tones to Lady Elias, who oversaw the kingdom's treasury. "The Northlands are testing our borders again," he whispered. "They sense weakness, and the treasury cannot sustain these endless feasts," Lady Elias replied. The king must be made to understand, but understanding seemed beyond Alexander's grasp or interest. When presented with reports of declining trade or military concerns, he would simply sigh and say, "Is there nothing good to report? Must you always bring me problems?" The situation reached a critical point when ambassadors from the neighboring kingdom of Thalasia visited for a diplomatic summit. Their king, a fit and sharp-minded ruler known for his military prowess, could barely conceal his contempt for Alexander. At the welcoming banquet, as Alexander struggled to rise from his seat to offer a toast, the Thalasian ambassador was overheard whispering to his aide, "They say the throne of Viridian creaks in relief when he leaves it." The comment, repeated by a servant with loose lips, spread through the palace like wildfire. By morning, it had reached Alexander's ears. For the first time in years, something pierced the comfortable fog that had enveloped the king. That evening, dismissing his attendants, Alexander stood alone before the grand mirror in his chambers. The reflection that stared back shocked him to his core. His face, once handsome and commanding, had become round and soft. His posture, once straight and proud, now curved forward, as if his body was perpetually bowing to the weight it carried. His royal robes, despite the tailor's best efforts, strained at the seams. "What has become of me?" he whispered to his reflection. The man in the mirror offered no comforting lies. That night, sleep eluded the king. As dawn broke, he made a decision that would change not only his life but the fate of his kingdom. He summoned his royal council to the throne room, not at midday as was his custom, but at first light. The ministers arrived, bleary-eyed and confused by the unusual summons. They found Alexander already seated on his throne, his crown properly positioned for the first time in months. "My lords and ladies," he announced, his voice stronger than they had heard it in years, "I have come to a realization. I have failed you and I have failed Viridian. This cannot continue." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. Therefore, Alexander continued, "I am issuing a royal decree. I seek someone who can help me regain my strength and vitality. Whoever succeeds will be richly rewarded with gold from the royal treasury and a position of honor in my court." The news spread quickly throughout the kingdom and beyond. Within days, the palace was besieged by physicians, healers, alchemists, and self-proclaimed miracle workers. Each brought their own remedies and regimens, eager to cure the king and claim the promised reward. A physician from the eastern provinces prescribed bitter herbal concoctions that made Alexander gag. The worse the taste, the better the medicine. The man insisted as the king reluctantly swallowed the vile liquid. An alchemist from the Southern Isles offered golden pills that he claimed contained the essence of the sun itself. "They will burn away the excess within you, Your Majesty," he promised. Alexander took them faithfully for a week, experiencing nothing but an upset stomach and an increasingly foul mood. A pair of twin healers from the western mountains brought smooth stones that they heated in sacred fires and placed on the king's body. "The stones draw out impurities," they explained as Alexander lay sweating and uncomfortable. For 2 months, Alexander tried every cure and followed every regimen presented to him. He drank potions, swallowed pills, endured strange treatments involving everything from needles to leeches, and followed diets that ranged from eating only foods of a certain color to consuming nothing but watered wine and bread for days on end. Yet despite all these efforts, his condition remained largely unchanged. If anything, the stress of these failed treatments made him turn even more to food for comfort, and his weight increased further. The ministers watched with growing despair as each new miracle cure failed. The treasury was being depleted by payments to these charlatans, and the king's health and mood were deteriorating rather than improving. It was at this lowest point that a strange figure appeared at the palace gates. An elderly man with a long grey beard and piercing eyes, dressed in a simple robe that had seen better days, requested an audience with the king. The guards, accustomed to turning away the stream of would-be healers that still arrived daily, were about to send him away when something in the old man's calm demeanor gave them pause. "I am Sage Elias," the old man said simply, "and I have what the king seeks." The guards exchanged glances. "Another miracle cure?" one asked skeptically. "No," Elias replied with a slight smile. "Something far more valuable, the truth." Intrigued despite themselves, the guards escorted Elias to the throne room, where Alexander was listlessly picking at a plate of sweetmeats while his ministers argued among themselves about border defenses. "Your Majesty," announced the guard, "Sage Elias seeks an audience." Alexander looked up, his eyes dull with disappointment from so many failed remedies. "Another healer? What miracle do you promise, old man? Will your potion make me as slim as a reed by morning? Will your incantations melt away my flesh while I sleep?" Elias bowed respectfully, but met the king's gaze without fear. "I promise no miracles, Your Majesty, only results, but there is a condition to my help." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "A condition? You dictate terms to your king, not terms, Your Majesty. Simply the nature of the cure itself. I cannot bring it to you. You must come to me to receive it." The throne room fell silent. No one had dared make such a request of the king in years. "Come to you?" Alexander's voice rose in indignation. "Do you not see me, old man? I can barely walk across this room without becoming winded. How am I to come to you?" "That," Elias said calmly, "is precisely the point. My dwelling is at the edge of the royal forest, a journey of approximately 1 hour's walk from the palace. When you wish to begin your cure, you will find me there." Before Alexander could respond, Elias bowed once more and turned to leave. "Stop him," Alexander commanded, but something in Elias's manner made the guards hesitate. In that moment of confusion, the old sage slipped away, seemingly vanishing into thin air. That night, Alexander's sleep was troubled. He dreamed of his younger self, strong and vital, looking at him with disappointment. He woke before dawn, a rare occurrence, with the sage's words echoing in his mind. "Bring my litter," he commanded his startled servants. "I will be carried to the edge of the royal forest." The journey was arranged, with 8 strong men required to carry the king's substantial weight. A procession formed, with guards, ministers, and curious courtiers following along. As they approached the forest's edge, they spotted a small, humble hut with smoke rising from its chimney. The litter-bearers set Alexander down at his command, and with great effort he rose to his feet. Leaning heavily on a walking stick, he approached the hut's door and knocked. A young boy, no more than 12 years old, opened the door and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty honors our humble home. Where is the sage?" Alexander demanded, already breathing heavily from the short walk from his litter. "Master Elias is gathering herbs in the deep forest, Your Majesty. He asked me to tell you that he will return tomorrow. If you wish to receive his cure, you must return then." Alexander's face flushed with anger. "This is an outrage. I am the king. The first do not make appointments." The boy remained respectfully bowed. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will convey your displeasure to my master when he returns." Fuming, Alexander had no choice but to return to his litter and be carried back to the palace. That evening, as he sat alone in his chambers, his initial anger gave way to curiosity. What kind of man would dare to treat a king this way? And what cure could possibly be worth such trouble? The next morning, to the surprise of his court, Alexander again commanded his litter to be prepared. The sage has had his jest, he told his concerned ministers. Today he will deliver his cure or face the consequences. Once again, the procession made its way to the forest's edge. This time, Alexander insisted on walking the final distance to the hut without assistance, though he still leaned heavily on his walking stick. The same boy greeted him at the door, with the same message. The sage was away and would return the following day. This pattern repeated for a full week. Each day, Alexander would make the journey to the hut, and each day he would be told to return tomorrow. What began as a royal command became a personal challenge. By the 7th day, Alexander had dismissed his litter entirely, choosing instead to walk the entire distance, albeit slowly and with frequent rests. On the 8th day, something strange happened. As Alexander approached the hut, he realized that his breathing was not as labored as it had been. The walk, while still difficult, did not seem quite as impossible as it had a week ago. On the 15th day, Alexander noticed that he had needed to call for his tailor. His robes, for the first time in years, felt slightly loose rather than uncomfortably tight. By the 30th day, the change was unmistakable. Alexander's face had begun to thin, his posture had improved, and he could walk the entire distance to the hut without stopping to rest. And yet, still, each day the boy would greet him with the same message, return tomorrow. On the 31st day, as Alexander approached the hut with a now familiar sense of determination mixed with frustration, he found not the boy but Sage Elias himself waiting outside. "Your Majesty," Elias bowed. "You honor me with your presence." "Enough games, Sage," Alexander said, surprised to find that he was not even slightly out of breath. "I have come every day for a month. Where is this cure you promised?" Elias smiled and gestured to a simple wooden bench beside the hut. "Please sit with me a moment." Alexander hesitated, then sat. The bench creaked but held his weight easily. Elias reached into his robe and produced a small clay cup. He dipped it into a nearby rain barrel and offered the cup of clear water to the king. "Drink this, and your transformation will be complete." Alexander eyed the cup suspiciously. "Water? After all this time, your miraculous cure is ordinary water." "Drink," Elias insisted gently. Alexander took the cup and drained it in one gulp. He waited, expecting to feel something, a tingling sensation, a rush of energy, anything to indicate that this was indeed a magical cure. But he felt nothing unusual. "I don't understand," he said finally. "What magic is this?" Elias laughed, a warm sound that held no mockery. "The only magic, Your Majesty, is the magic you yourself have worked these past 31 days. "What do you mean?" "Look at yourself," Elias said. "When you first came to my door, you could barely stand without assistance. Your face was flushed from the effort of walking a few steps. Your breathing was labored. Now, you have walked over 2 miles to reach my hut, and you sit here conversing without gasping for air." Alexander stared at the old man as understanding slowly dawned. "There was never any potion or spell," Elias continued. "The cure was the journey itself. Each day you walked a little farther, breathed a little easier, grew a little stronger. The magic was not in my hands, but in your feet, in your will, in your decision to return day after day, despite being turned away. You tricked me," Alexander said, but there was no anger in his voice. "I helped you discover what you already knew but had forgotten," Elias corrected gently. "There are no shortcuts to health or to wisdom. No potion can replace persistence. No spell is as powerful as daily effort. The weight you carried was not just in your body, but in your approach to life itself, always seeking the easy path, the quick solution, the instant gratification." Alexander sat in silence, absorbing the sage's words. Finally, he looked up, meeting Elias's gaze directly. "The boy, was he part of your plan as well?" "My grandson," Elias nodded. "He played his role well, didn't he?" "Indeed," Alexander agreed. "And what now? What is your reward for this unconventional cure?" Elias shook his head. "I seek no gold or position, Your Majesty. My reward is seeing Viridian's king restored to himself. But if you wish to repay me, then take this lesson back to your kingdom. Rule with the same persistence and dedication that brought you to my door 31 days in a row. Remember that true change, in a person or in a nation, comes not from miraculous interventions but from consistent effort." Alexander stood, feeling the newfound strength in his legs, the straightness in his spine. "You are a wise man, Sage Elias. Will you not come to the palace as my advisor? Your counsel would be valuable." "My place is here," Elias replied. but your place is on your throne, ruling with the wisdom you have earned through your own efforts. That is where you belong." Alexander nodded, understanding. "Then I shall return to my duties, carrying with me the most valuable lesson I have ever learned." As he walked back toward the palace, alone, unaided, and with a purposeful stride, Alexander felt the weight of his crown, still heavy with responsibility, but no longer unbearable. The true weight, he realized, had never been in the gold upon his head, but in the choices he made each day. The transformation of King Alexander became legendary in Viridian. Under his renewed leadership, the kingdom flourished. The once lazy ruler became known for his energy and dedication, rising before dawn and working tirelessly for his people's welfare. His ministers, initially skeptical of the change, became his most loyal supporters as they witnessed his genuine commitment to improvement, both personal and political. And though Sage Elias never left his humble hut at the forest's edge, his wisdom spread throughout the land. For Alexander had indeed taken the lesson to heart: there are no shortcuts to greatness. The path to true change is walked one step at a time, one day at a time, with persistence that outlasts disappointment and determination that overcomes obstacles. The weight of Alexander's crown remained, as all positions of leadership carry their burdens, but he had learned to carry it with strength born of daily discipline rather than seeking to escape.